Hi everyone, my name's Miranda and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today on my channel I'm starting a new little series called Shelf Help. I turn to books all the time for consolation, for words of wisdom, and I thought it would be really fun to start a little series where I think of a problem, or maybe you'll ask me about a problem, and I'll try to recommend some books that I think will help you solve that problem. So for today's Shelf Help, I am talking about books that you should read if you need some vitamin D. I'm recording this on a really grey, wet day in London, and I'm definitely dreaming of some sunshine because at the moment my vitamin D is really only coming in tablet form. Now, usually I do like to read books in season, so I'll read wintry reads in the winter and summery reads in the summer, for instance, but on a late February day, sometimes I really do just want to read some books with some sunshine in them. So let's get started. My first recommendation is The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arman. This is one of my all-time favourite books. It was originally published in 1922, and although I do like to often reread this book in April, it actually starts on a bleak, grey, rainy day in February in London, in Hampstead in fact. I live in West Hampstead, so this feels very apropos for today. So the book is all about some dissatisfied housewives who get together and decide they really need a rest. They want to get away from the rain, they want to get away from Hampstead, they want to get away from their husbands. So they start dreaming about wisteria and the Italian sun-soaked landscape, and they plan a holiday to Italy for April. The only problem is they have very limited means. So they advertise for some other women to join them on their holiday to this little Italian castle so they can split the costs. So this group of rather ill-assorted women set off for Italy in April. When they get there, it seems like their dreams have come true. The little castle is gorgeous, there's wisteria climbing up the walls, and everything is as it should be. However, all of the women are dissatisfied with their lives for some reason or another. But as they holiday in Italy and they just enjoy soaking up the sun, they learn how to find happiness in their lives. So by the end of the holiday, they are all, for the most part, quite different women. This is such an enchanting, fun read that if you yourself are in need of a bit of sunshine, then I really, really recommend The Enchanted April. Next, I have to recommend one author. That's Mary Stewart. I read all of her books, I think, when I was a teenager and into my early 20s. And they're wonderful light reads. Mary Stewart wrote these in the 1950s, 1960s, that kind of era. And they're all about essentially a young woman who goes on holiday abroad and stumbles upon some kind of mystery or some kind of adventure. This one is called This Rough Magic, and it's set in Corfu. It says Lucy Waring, a young out-of-work actress from London, leaps at the chance to visit her sister for a summer on the island of paradise of Corfu. And what's more, a famous but reclusive actor is staying in a villa nearby. But Lucy's hopes for rest and romance are shattered when a body washes up on the beach and she finds herself swept up in a chilling chain of events. So there is always some kind of mystery. The girl always gets wrapped up in it. There's always a hero, so there's always a bit of romance as well, and it's often the man who you actually think is the villain turns out not to be. But these are such fun, light-hearted reads. They're some of my favourite cozy reads, but they're also some of my favourite armchair travel reads, because Mary Stewart generally sets her books in quite exotic locations that are definitely sun-filled locations too. So yes, these will give you some virtual vitamin D, to be sure. I'm also going to recommend Madam Will You Talk by her. This one is set in Provence, so again, an excellent choice. And also, these have fairly recently been republished, I think by Hodder. Yes, by Hodder, and I absolutely love the covers. They're all stunning. I think I've now collected all of the books that they've republished in this series, and I do adore them. The covers are beautiful. So Mary Stewart is a real recommendation. Next, I'm going to recommend Spring Magic by D.E. Stevenson. This is about a young girl, can't remember her name now, oh yes, Frances, who is living a very dreary life in London during World War II. On a whim, she decides that she's sort of had enough and she deserves a holiday. She wants to get away from her domineering stepmother and her rather weak-willed father, so she decides to go to Scotland. So she travels there completely on her own to a remote village by the sea in Scotland, and there she witnesses the start of spring, and she takes herself off for long rambles around the countryside. And it's a very gentle, cozy sort of story. There is a bit of romance in this. I found it really interesting because D.E. Stevenson herself was an army wife, and she writes in a lot of her books about the community of army wives and what that life was really like. And in this book, Frances befriends quite a few army wives, so there's a lot about that in the book. But it's just a really sweet read, and Frances also finds the landscape and the sunshine, the start of spring around her, very restorative, and I think this is a very restorative read, and will also be a bit of sunshine on a bleak day. So yes, I recommend this one. Obviously, I do actually recommend all of these. But so the next one is Picnic in Provence, A Tale of Love in France with Recipes by Elizabeth Bard. I really love Elizabeth Bard's books. I've mentioned them before on my channel. Her first memoir was Lunch in Paris, and this is the follow-up memoir called Picnic in Provence. In Lunch in Paris, Elizabeth Bard falls in love with a Frenchman and marries him, and in this book she writes about their move from Paris to Provence and setting up their own ice cream company in Provence. So this is definitely a sun-soaked read as well, and there are some lovely recipes through it. I actually went and visited Elizabeth when I was in Provence a few years ago. I went to the little town that she lives in, and I had ice cream at their little ice cream place, and it was just lovely. It was such an amazing memory, and I got to meet her, of course, so that was really fantastic. And whenever I look at this book now, I just think of sunshine and Provence and eating ice cream and that special day. So this book definitely acts as some vitamin D for me. So next, I'm going to recommend one of my other all-time favourite books, which is The Panama Alone by Mary Wesley. So this novel starts off in the August of 1939, so just before war is declared, and it's about a young group of cousins who gather every summer in Cornwall. Their uncle has this lawn, a chamomile lawn at the back of his house, and the cousins will gather on it, and Mary Wesley writes about this nostalgic summer that is always blended with the scent of chamomile in the cousins' minds, because of course after this last summer together, World War II begins and their lives change completely, and you follow what happens to each of these characters during the war. I just love this book. It has that nostalgic quality to it, and I love the descriptions of this sun-drenched summer in Cornwall. I adore Cornwall, so I love that part of this book is set in Cornwall. There's also a really great anti-heroine in this called Calypso. When I first read this, I really didn't like Calypso at the start of the book, but my opinion of her really shifted the more and more that I read. And I love it when an author can do that, when she can sort of radically change your mind about one of her characters. And that definitely happened for me in this book. But it will also have you dreaming of summers in Cornwall as well. Then sometimes it's people who can bring sunshine to your life. So with that in mind, I'm recommending this book, Dear Mrs. Bird by A.J. Pierce. This is set during World War II, but it features a brilliant character called Emmy. And she's just such a spark of joy and a ray of sunshine. I love her voice in this book. It's so plucky and just really light-hearted. I loved reading this. It's about a young girl called Emmy who starts working for a woman's magazine during the war, and she is almost like a secretary to an agony aunt columnist who is not a very pleasant woman. And Emmy starts typing up her letters that she sends in response to the readers who write in about their problems seeking advice. And Emmy starts to feel very sorry because her boss rejects so many of the letters. She won't reply to anything that she considers having sort of any, nastiness in them at all. So young women who are struggling with being left alone without their husbands, for instance, or young women who are unsure whether they should marry someone or not, she won't deal with any of those queries. So Emmy starts to secretly write back and give these women advice. Of course, in the end, she gets found out. But there's a lot of hilarity in between, although this book obviously does also deal with some darker themes, and there is some tragedy that happens in this. But I just so admire Emmy's courage, and I think she's just got a brilliant voice in literature. I really admire how A.J. Pierce wrote this, and I think this book is bound to cheer anyone up. So another recommendation. Then my final recommendation is In the Full Light of the Sun by Claire Clark. Now, I haven't read this one myself yet. It's actually one I would like to read in my quest to get a little more virtual vitamin D into my own life. I couldn't resist the cover and the title. This book has actually been on my shelf for quite a while though, so I think now is quite a good excuse to read it, and I wanted to share it with you too. It's set in Berlin in the interwar years, but it's all about a group of artists and sort of generally creative people. So it's about art and music and love and life in Berlin before the outbreak of war. So I'm really interested, as you can probably tell, in that period of history anyway. I think looking at it from the perspective of what was happening in Berlin, and then in particular looking at it through the eyes of creatives and artists, is really interesting. And I also really like the idea of how artists perceive light and how light is important in paintings, and how the sun and light are used in that way. So I thought that this one would also be a nice addition to our vitamin D pile of books. But those are my recommendations. Do let me know about the books that bring a bit of sunshine into your life, or if you're tempted to read any of these, or if you have any shelf help questions that you would like me to tackle, then let me know. But thank you so much for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, which you can do by clicking my face that pops up here. I'll be back again very soon with another video. Bye!